Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places, and today I'm going to be making a highly requested video. So I get requests a lot for naan, flatbreads, and pitas. So we're going to tackle the naan bread today. And I love this recipe because it's very simple. You don't need a mixer. It's a great recipe if you're just starting out with fresh milled flour. That way you can get to know the dough, get to work with it. It's kind of forgiving and it's pretty fun and very tasty. So let's get started. Okay, so to start out making our naan, I'm going to weigh out my wheat berries. And when I weigh out the wheat berries, that way I know how much weight of flour I have. I love to do this for my recipes because then I know I'm getting the exact measurement that I need. Everyone's flour value will need a little more or a little less depending on your humidity, the moisture in your wheat berries alone. Even those can vary. The moisture of the wheat berries can vary from batch to batch from the same manufacturer. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that sometimes you may have to adjust the flour. So today we're going to be using half of our hard white and half of our kamut. So this is very similar to my tortilla recipe, which I can link that below if you're interested in taking a look at that. I will also make sure to link this recipe down below. If I ever have a discrepancy between what I say in my video or what I have written in my blog for my printable recipe, always go with the printed version because that one is more accurate because I can keep that up to date as I go, whereas once I upload a video, I can't really change that. So I'm going to just zero this out. And then other half we're going to be using kamut. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take this over to my mill and we'll go ahead and get to milling the flour. I'm using my Nutri-Mill Harvest Grain Mill, and right now you can use my coupon code GRAINY, which I will put in the description box below, and the link where you can grab $20 off your own grain mill. Okay, so while that's milling, we're going to go ahead and get our water, and we're going to get about 3/4 cup of water. And I like to actually weigh that and zero that out as well, and it's going to give me about 180 or so grams. 178, I'll take that. Okay, I'm going to warm this up slightly in the microwave. That way we have nice warm water. We don't want it to be so hot that it can kill our yeast, but we do want it slightly warm. Okay, this is nice and warmed. I can put my hand in here without burning. About 30 seconds in the microwave is fine. And then looks like our fresh milled flour is done and ready to go. To my flour, I'm going to go ahead and add about a teaspoon of sugar. You could sub for honey there. And then I'm going to put my warm water in here. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to let this sit for a little bit after we mix it together. So I'm just going to mix this together, and I love this recipe because this is something I can make like without a mixer. It's a nice beginning recipe if you're starting out with fresh milled flour. So I like to go ahead and just mix these together. And we're going to add other ingredients to this, but I'm going to let the flour start hydrating with the liquid that we put in there. So we're going to go ahead and just cover this and let it sit for about 15 minutes or so. And then we'll come back to it. We'll add our other ingredients and we will add our yeast. So I'm just going to cover that up. And this is a great recipe that you can use if you need to throw something to get together for dinner and you don't have, 4 hours or whatever to make bread. Just kind of one of those nice recipes to have in your arsenal. So let's let this sit for about 15 minutes or so. Okay, now it's been sitting for 15 minutes, so we can go ahead and add in the rest of the ingredients. I'm just going to save this to the side because we'll need it again. We're going to put in a half a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, and I really like to use this. They have two different kinds, but this is the one without the added aluminum in it, so that's good, and it's the double acting. I can put a link below if you're interested in any of the things that you see in my video. If you have any questions about them, that's where you can find them, down in the description box below. All right, and then we're going to put 2 tablespoons of yogurt. So you can either make your own homemade yogurt, which I do have a video showing you how to do that, or you can purchase plain yogurt at the store, whatever method you prefer. And then I'm going to use a tablespoon of oil. You want to use a neutral oil, so I'm using olive oil. You could use avocado oil or any of the neutral liquid at room temperature oils. So I'm not sure if coconut oil would work or not, since it's a solid usually at room temperature. And then I'm just going to give that a mix. And it doesn't want to come together at first, but you can see if you keep messing with it and keep mixing it around, it will come together. We want to just kind of knead this yogurt and oil into the dough, and then we'll pull it out and start kneading. So sometimes it's easier just to get in there with your hands. All right, and now we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of instant yeast. If you're using active dry yeast, I actually recommend instant yeast for this particular recipe because I think that it helps the rising and the bubbling a little bit better, and I also think it makes it just a little bit more of a tender dough. But if you only have active dry yeast, I would recommend, while we did that 15-minute sit, to pull some of the water from the recipe and then just a pinch of that sugar and put it in with your active dry yeast and then let it become foamy. And then after the 15 minutes, when we did all of that, it should be foamy. If it's not foamy, then there's something wrong with your yeast. Or the water was too hot that you put it in with and it killed it. But anyway, so if it's foamy, go ahead and dump it in at this point, and then you can continue on with the recipe the same way. So what we're going to do is just going to pull this up and just kind of knead this yeast right in. This is not a dough that needs to be kneaded for a long period of time. We don't need to worry about like getting the window pane or anything like that like we do with our bread dough. But as you can see, it is slightly sticky, but it's not so sticky that, you know, it won't form a ball. You can see it's forming a ball. If you end up having something that's just mush at this point, make sure that you did do that 15-minute rest period, because that really helps the flour to start absorbing all of that liquid, because it does take a lot longer to absorb than regular white flour. So if it's still, after you do that rest period, so sticky that you can't manage it, then you could sprinkle just a little tiny bit more flour in here. But you do not want this to be a super dry, stiff dough. If it ends up being super dry and stiff, then you can always add just a little bit more water into this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, you saw I just lightly did that in my bowl. I'm going to put just a little bit of olive oil on my work surface here. And a little bit on my hands. And we're going to start kneading gently. We're not necessarily wanting to make a big mess or work with the dough too much, but just a little bit, just till we form this smooth ball, which you can see that's kind of happening for me already. Okay, so I'm happy with that. If you have it start sticking to your table, you can always add more oil, or you can use the bench scraper, which is very helpful anytime you're working with dough on a flat surface. So let me get my hands cleaned up, and then we'll cover that. All right, we're going to go ahead and cover this back up and let this rise. So it's going to rise maybe 1 to 2 hours depending on your dough and depending on how warm or cold it is in your house. I generally let it go about an hour. If it's really cold in your house, then it may take longer than that. So we'll be back to check on the dough. I forgot to mention to go ahead and either rub this with some olive oil or spray the bowl and the dough on top before you cover it. Then you can cover it and let it go for an hour. Just think it's so cute. I wanted to show you where we're staying. We almost daily have had these family of deer come through our site, and it's just adorable. I wanted to share with you. Okay, so now our dough has pretty much doubled in size. So I'm going to take this off and save the plastic here because I'm going to want to keep these covered as I work with them. I'm going to add just a little bit of olive oil to my work surface. This will help keep things from sticking. And really all I'm going to do is take this dough and we're going to divide it into 8 pieces. So in order to do that, I'm just going to bring it all together here. So after we divide this into 8 pieces, I'm going to use that to cover the little pieces up. We'll let it sit for about 15 minutes, and then that way our dough will be rested. Because what happens if we go ahead and we just start rolling them out, the dough wants to just keep pulling itself back. So this will help keep the dough from pulling itself back. If you find when you start rolling them out, if the dough keeps shrinking, and as you're rolling and shrinking really badly, you may just need to cover it and let it sit just a little bit longer. That just means the dough hasn't relaxed yet. So we have a little air bubble here, just gonna pop that. So I'm gonna take these little balls, kind of similar to how when we make the tortillas, just going to, or how we even shape dinner rolls. I just want to put a little bit of surface tension on that, roll it around. And during this rest period, I guess I forgot my train of thought. That's what I was going to say. We want to make sure we preheat this pan for that 15 to 20 minutes. I'm using a cast iron pan here. You can use a nonstick pan. It doesn't work quite as well, but it will work. Traditionally, naan is cooked in one of the tandoors, and they get super hot. So they are cooked like that, or even on an open flame. Fun story. The very first time I ever made naan was when we were boondocking. I was looking for a recipe that I wouldn't need to get my mixer out. I was looking for a recipe that would use very little energy because we had no hookups while we were traveling that day. And so I was like, well, let's make some kind of flatbread. And I thought that would be a great idea because then we could cook it outside over either the open fire, or we ended up taking our cast iron pan and putting it on our propane burner that we have. And that ended up working out really well. Anytime this gets too sticky, you can always just add some more olive oil to your table or add some more to your hands. I probably will add some more when we go to roll them out. But right now I'm just wanting to put a little bit of surface tension on these and let them sit. If you want to weigh your dough, figure out your total amount, divide it by 8, then you can figure out how much you need for each dough to be perfectly the same. I don't really mind if I have some larger and some smaller. So I just make my best guess. Okay. I don't want these to stick together, but I do want to make sure I cover them. So while these are resting for their 15 minutes, I'm going to turn this to medium high and let it go. It may need to be turned up, but I need to make sure that this is preheated all the way. So let me go ahead and move these out of the way. That way we can get to rolling them out after our 15 minutes. So I will be back. Okay, so now that these have been resting, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more olive oil on my work surface. And put a little bit back here so I can move my little dough balls out of the way. This mat comes in super handy because the dough usually comes off pretty easily. I don't have too bad of sticking problems like I used to when I used just my table. Okay. I'm going to work with one at a time here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and roll these out. This is still preheating. I want to just roll them out into kind of like an oval or oblong shape. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on my little rolling pin here. And once I do that, I'm going to spray the top with just a little bit of water. You can either brush it with water or spray it. And I'm going to just put it water side down so it kind of sticks into here. So I'm gonna just give this a little press. We don't want to make these thin like tortillas. That's not our goal, but you can see how it's wanting to squish back a little, so that means it just needs to be rested a little bit longer. So hopefully by the time I get to the end of this, they'll be ready to go. Just want to make these kind of an even shape, and then I'm just going to spray this, a little bit of water, and put this water side down. And these are going to cook for about 45 to 90 seconds on one side. Flip it, and then we're going to go another to 60 seconds or so. And then after they get done, we want to brush them with some melted butter. So you can either have that on standby and brush them as you go, or you can go ahead and just brush them all at the end. So you can see here, we're already starting to have a little bit of bubblage happening. Just going to go ahead and roll the next one out so it's ready to go. And these don't have to be perfectly shaped, so that's kind of the fun part of this, is we want this little rustic shape. And we'll see how we go here, if our temperature is where we need it to be or not, or if we need to adjust it up. Because remember, these sometimes are cooked on open flames, so I may need to go up too high or go higher. When it starts to come up off the pan, you know it's probably ready to be flipped. I've got myself some melted butter here. This is probably about a tablespoon. Hopefully that's enough. I'll just go ahead and brush it on after I pull these off. Yeah, those are beautiful in there. So we don't want to keep these on too long. If they're not starting to bubble up pretty quickly, then something maybe went wrong with our recipe. We didn't use an acid like the baking powder likes to mix with the acid in the yogurt. You could also sub for buttermilk. You may need a little bit more flour if you do that. Okay, I am happy with that. Ooh, it's hot, but I wanted to show you the beautiful little char marks. And I'm just going to brush this with some melted butter. Of course, you can get fancy here and you could use garlic butter. You could sprinkle with some herbs. Whatever you really want to do. I may end up having to melt some more butter, but I'm going to go ahead and carry on, spray my next one. I may do the next couple a little bit thicker. Hear that sizzle? It's okay if it sticks right when you put it in, that's normal. You can see how it's not wanting to cook around the edges here. That just means my pan wasn't fully preheated. So you do want to make sure that you preheat these at least 15 to 20 minutes. If you're using a non-stick skillet, you probably don't need to preheat it as long, but again, the non-stick skillets make not quite as good as our char marks as we would like, but it still works in a pinch. So what happens is, if your heat is too low, the naans will cook all the way through and you will lose that like chew that they traditionally have. If your heat is too high, obviously they will burn and scorch, but I don't mind even putting these on a higher temperature, like say 400 degrees. This is nice because I can tell how hot I actually have my pan set to. I mean, I don't know, it probably would be good even to do the highest heat with the sear. That might give us really beautiful char marks. Yeah, we definitely needed it to be a little bit higher. So I'm at 425 now. And I'm worried I may overcook this one now. Alright, that one's going to end up being a little on the light side. Alright, this one I went ahead and rolled a little bit thicker, letting that be a little bit warmer on the temperature. Let's take a look at that, and I'm gonna go ahead and actually melt some more butter. Alrighty, I melted some more butter. And this one, I like this thicker. This is looking nice. Yeah, wonderful. I like the thicker with the higher temperature better, but they cook a lot faster, so you got to make sure that you are paying attention. Don't walk away. So I'm finding about that thickness I'm liking. So what is that? Let me see. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and there we have it. We have our plate of 8 naans. So I hope you really enjoyed this recipe. Thanks for hanging out with me today while we made this naan bread with fresh milled flour. Don't forget to check out my blog at grainsofsmallplaces.net, where you can find this recipe and a whole bunch of other recipes all dedicated to fresh milled flour. So thank you for stopping by Grains of Small Places. Goodbye.